sold the show to CBS by referencing, and I believe brought it into his meeting with Leslie Moonves, a reproduction of Norman Rockwell's, I forget what the painting is called, but it's that Thanksgiving. It's
Right.
that everyone's around the table and there's a beautifully done turkey. And he said, I want to do a show that has the drive of a police procedural, but it's a family. So it
Hmm.
has the element of a family drama as well as a police drama. They've got two police commissioners, one former, a detective, a rookie when we started, a rookie beat cop, and an assistant district attorney with the Manhattan's DA's office.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 45 Forward on Bold Brave TV. This is your host, Ron Roel. Now, if you're from my generation of older TV watchers, there was a time, at least before DVRs and streaming services totally upended the weekly viewing habits we all had, that Friday nights for me were frequently reserved to watch, no, not Friday Night Football, but the police hit show Blue Bloods. Now, while the show recently completed its 14-year run, its executive producer and showrunner, Kevin Wade, thankfully for us, has not retired. He started another chapter in his writing career with the recent debut of a terrific crime thriller, Careless. So, in today's show, Kevin will take us through his time with Blue Bloods, as well as his wide ranging career before that as playwright, actor, screenwriter, TV producer that shaped the vision for the show. And of course, he'll talk about how he made his transition as a novelist and developed a new world of characters for Johnny Careless. So now let's meet our guest, Kevin Wade. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Ron, thanks for having me. Nice to be
It's
here.
it's a pleasure to have you. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, uh, this is I found it a very compelling new novel. It's a fast read. I had to, I did read it, and I saved it for reading before bed, and I had to sort of stop myself, like, okay, don't save some for tomorrow. I know you want to keep reading it, but wait for tomorrow. So it was. We'll talk about how you developed the novel, but first, let's talk a bit about Blue Bloods. And you had a 14-year run. I guess you started in the second season as the showrunner, right?
Yeah, I came onto it. I had known Tom Selleck. I'd worked with Tom on a movie
Mm-hmm.
called Mr. Baseball in Japan in the
Mm-hmm.
mid '90s, and Leonard Goldberg, who created Blue Bloods, ran 20th Century Fox when they made a movie called Working Girl that I had written. So I'd
Mm-hmm.
worked with them both literally back in the last century,
Mm-hmm.
and they were just starting up Blue Bloods. And a friend of mine said, they're both here. They'd love you to come in and talk to them. Have you seen the show? Blah blah blah. I went in. I talked to them. I had some ideas, and they were freely admitting that they didn't really know what to do with Tom Selleck's character, the commissioner. And I gave them my little elevator pitch, and I think I started the next day. And
Wow.
I wrote two or three of the episodes in the first season, including the first season finale.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, kind of jumping in, Leonard asked me to start what they call show running the second season, and I
Yeah.
ended up doing it for 13 years.
Wow. Yeah. So what does that mean, Kevin, as a showrunner? You were also executive producer. So what's the difference?
It's a great question and almost unanswerable. It's a made up term. There is no Writers Guild of America contract that says showrunner. You have never watched a TV show and seen the credits crawl at the end where it says showrunner so and
Right.
so. It always says executive producer. It's the placement. It means essentially two things. You are the head writer and you are the ambassador between the writing staff and the scripting portion of a show and the actors and
Mm-hmm.
their needs, and then everything kind of flows from there. So for me, it was chief cook and bottle washer, backseat driver, casting final say, editing final say, a lot of things that I could do just mediocre, but paid attention and had great people around me. So
Yeah.
I did a lot of stuff that was interesting and a lot of fun on it.
Yeah, yeah. Now you hadn't done a police show before, but how did you learn a little bit about this world?
Two ways. I'd been reading detective, police fiction,
Mhm.
action, spy, but mostly detective stories. I'd read, since I was a kid, since my dad, he was a big fan of a guy named Joseph Wambaugh, who wrote a
Mm,
novel called The Onion Field, The New Centurions. He was an ex-LAPD guy with an enormous gift for writing and almost a David Mamet ear for dialogue. And so I started with that. I got turned on to Raymond Chandler and John D. McDonald, and I won't to go through the list, but I've been reading this stuff since I was a kid. And when I
mhm.
sat down to write my first Blue Blood script, it occurred to me what you just said. You had no idea what you were doing. You've never done this before. But by page two or three, I was like, oh, yeah, I've read a million of these. I know
Mhm.
how supposed to move. I know that the dialogue should have a lot of muscle in it and mustard on it. And I just kind of, didn't worry about it and started doing it.
Yeah, yeah. So before Blue Bloods, I had watched, a number of shows. I liked NYPD Blue and, you know, uh, uh, so, and I was actually, in college, I was a student of David Milch, so I knew him a bit.
Oh,
Um,
that's right. I forgot. We've talked about that. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But your show was different for me, and it seemed. I'm trying to think of the right word, and maybe you'll know the right. But my word is like more fulsome. There are a lot of, shows where, it focuses on sort of male oriented, it's on these detectives. It's sort of their dysfunctionality. I mean, they're dedicated. They're sort of, iconoclastic and so forth. But your characters seem to, and maybe this is part of your broader background as a playwright and as an actor, and you've worked on shows that featured women characters. Did you think about that when you were creating these characters?
We had two marching orders, really. One of them from Leonard Goldberg. And
Hmm.
Leonard sold the show to CBS by referencing, and I believe brought it into his meeting with Leslie Moonves, a reproduction of Norman Rockwell's, I forget what the painting is called, but it's that Thanksgiving. It's
Right.
that everyone's around the table and there's a beautifully done turkey. And he said, I want to do a show that has the drive of a police procedural, but it's a family. So it
Hmm.
has the element of a family drama as well as a police drama. They've got two police commissioners, one former, a detective, a rookie when we started, a rookie beat cop, and an assistant district attorney with the Manhattan's DA's office. So it was really those were the marching orders, and I was very aware from the start of the time slot. Frankly,
Hmm.
on Friday night at 10 p.m. Traditionally, it had been a good launching pad for cop shows and for medical shows. I thought if we lean into the family stuff, maybe we get a bigger audience than just the guys watching. Maybe their
Hmm.
wives watch. Maybe they watch with their daughter. So we were aware of that, of trying to, listen, it's a death slot Friday night at 10 o'clock until we got on.
Right.
It just was. Um, so we did that, and towards the end of the first year I was working on it, I was driving to work one day, and I remembered a show from when I'm going to say I was a kid, and maybe you were a littler kid, called Bonanza. Bonanza was
Mm.
on Sunday nights, I believe, on NBC,
Right.
and it was, when you boil it down, it was about a widowed father and his three sons keeping the peace in the area where they lived. In that case, it was the Ponderosa Ranch in Colorado. In this case, it was a bunch of Catholics in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, but it was kind of the same thing. And I called up one of the assistants and said, look on the internet, there's going to be a synopsis of all those years of Bonanza episodes. We can steal them. The statute of limitations is up. So somebody researched that. It wasn't that much I could use, but it was fun to go. This thing has a father and a grandfather.
Right.
It's part of television history of mashing together two things to make a third thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we were, our family was a big watcher of Bonanza. My parents loved it. They had
Yeah,
4 sons instead of 3, but,
yep,
it resonates,
yeah.
but it's not so easy to pull off sometimes, to do a kind of show like that without turning into the Waltons, it takes some finesse.
It really helped that we were surrounded by and real life NYPD. We lived and shot on the streets of New York. Uh,
Mhm.
we had a guy named James Nusiforo, Jimmy Nusiforo, who was a decorated ex NYPD detective who was our tech advisor. And he wasn't phoning it in. He was there every day on set or in the writer's office, keeping it real,
Right.
showing us exactly how this could or could not happen. And we obeyed him. And it became kind of a point of pride for when you would meet a cop or a cop would come up and say, you work at Blue Bloods. So we always wonder how you get that stuff right. And I give
Ooh.
all credit to Jimmy. But it was a great, I always imagine if you worked on a medical show, the highest compliment you could get was a doctor coming up saying, that's exactly how I do a triple bypass. So we tried to pay attention to that.
Right, right. The other aspect I liked about it is that your women characters seem also, you know, more interesting and developed. A lot of shows, they seem to me that yes, there's been a lot of cultural change in the police force about bringing in women, but a lot of the characters, do seem a little forced and
Yes.
jammed in there, and I don't know for diversity purposes, but whatever. Um, but but yours seem to fit in better, and I was wondering whether obviously, you had a lot of people working with you, but did your and your experiences working on projects like the Kashmir Mafia and Working Girl, did they, sort of inform how you could really develop women characters better?
Better, I'll leave. I'll take the compliment and leave up to the audience. I did. I was struck when I wrote Working Girl. It occurred to me just write the women characters the way you would write them if they were men.
Hmm.
Don't make excuses for or don't soften things because you think you're writing a female character.
I
Write the
see.
same dialogue as you would for a guy and see what it
Hmm.
looks like coming out, on a woman. And
Hmm.
it seemed to be a good rule of thumb because rarely have I gotten complaints from actresses saying she's so mamby-pamby or she's so
Mm.
this or that. I try to give them just as much muscle and risk as I would a guy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that struck me too is that, there was what I just called myself as a writer, sort of a writerly quality to the dialogue, and again, it seemed like you were, you were a playwright as well, and you were an actor, and I think so. Your command of dialogue, I thought, was pretty exceptional. Again, it
Well,
came across
thank you.
authentically.
It
So thank you.
it's yeah, and you put the 2 together, it's, both stage plays and teleplays, television dramas, um, are largely dependent on the muscle and the mustard in the dialogue because, most television, when you get to the crucial part of the scene, it's shot and or it's edited to be pretty much the way you and I are talking right now in a medium
Hmm.
close. On the stage, you can't show the car chase, nor would you try. You're not even going to write the car chase. You're going to write right before the car chase or write the aftermath, and it's going to be 2 or 3 people going, "We got to do this," or "Boy, did we screw that up." And so
Hmm.
that has to have the urgency of the offstage action, but keep the audience pulled in and excited.
Yeah, right. Wow, that went fast, but we have to take a short break now, Kevin.
Okay.
But folks, we'll be right back very soon, talking much more with Kevin Wade, the former executive producer and showrunner of the hit police drama Blue Bloods, who recently completed the 14-year run and has debuted as a novelist with a crime thriller Johnny Careless. So, folks, don't go anywhere. We have much more with Kevin Wade.
Are you caring for an aging loved one? It can feel overwhelming, but you don't have to do it alone. Ron's book, The Caregiving Navigator, is a step by step guide designed to help you plan, prepare, and provide compassionate care with confidence. From organizing family conversations to navigating long-term care and finding support for yourself, the caregiver, it's all here. Find the Caregiving Navigator now on Amazon and take the first step toward peace of mind.
Welcome back, folks. This is Ron Roel. We're talking today with Kevin Wade, the former executive producer of Blue Bloods and now a novelist with a terrific crime thriller, Johnny Careless. Before the break, we were talking to Kevin about his writing career, and just I was asking about his approach to dialogue and writing, and his, basically his authentic approach to his dialogue. And I was just recalling, as we were talking, my own very brief career as a so-called filmmaker in graduate school when I made a 14-minute documentary,
Mhm.
black and white. So that'll tell you a little bit about when. Um, but I remember this one very sobering moment with my professor who was a documentary filmmaker, and I was describing a scene that I was talking about, and he said, "Well, what's going on in this scene?" And I just described it to him, and he just sort of gave me this blank look. He said, "Well, I don't see it." That may
Yeah.
be in your head, but it's not there. It's got to be there. So I think that it's from a writer, and to being on screen, you've got to really show it in a different way. And you can do flashbacks and things like that, but it's you really need to have a command for what it's still a visual form. People are looking at it, and you've got to have it there right in front of them.
You have to, I mean, the dramatic right without boring your audience, but you have to have 2 or more people in a room, and they have opposite needs. One has something that the other wants, and
Hmm.
that other person will not give it to them. And it all kinda grows from there. And as much as you can come into that scene as late as possible without the audience being in the dark and leave before it's resolved because you're telling a story. You're not telling a scene that has a beginning, middle, and end, and that part's over. So the building blocks are relatively simple. Um, if you're writing a play or a movie, they have their own pragmatic needs. In television, in Blue Bloods, we were telling 3 or 4 stories an episode.
Hmm.
So you
Hmm.
have to be very aware of pacing and interlocking these 3 or 4 stories, which sometimes meant that each story only got 4 or 5 or 6 scenes often. So you were very aware of just it had to be incredibly economical without short shrifting the audience, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, talking about short shrifting your life, it's hard when you're doing a season like this.
Yeah.
The schedule must be incredibly demanding. I mean, for me, just doing a weekly podcast is is a lot. I'm like, I can't imagine doing a show. So tell me a little bit about that life. What was that like?
It's a big piece of machinery. On the given day, you've got about 240 in crew, including the
Mm.
actors. On the other given day, you've got those 240 plus anywhere from 50 to 300 extras, all of whom have to be dressed, fed, made up, transported, and sheltered.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're doing it on your stages, it's a little bit of an easier day. But for the showrunner, you've got at any given time, you've got 5 scripts in some stage of development, 2 or 3 or 4 episodes in some stage of either pre-production or post-production, which is scoring it, editing it, sound mixing it, et cetera, et cetera. I won't get into all the weeds, but for my job, started early on Monday morning and the week ended. Usually, I would clock it by the second NFL football game on Sunday. So I was off at about 4:30 on Sunday and had
Wow.
Sunday night. But otherwise, I was either writing or I was doing all the other things that I do.
Wow.
So
So.
it's a long week and it's a lot, and when you go out on location, you're moving. It's a small army. You're in tractor trailers. You're taking over blocks and blocks just for parking to be on location. You've got church basements or whatever to do hair, makeup, and you've got another church basement to feed people.
Mm,
So it's a lot of logistics.
right, right. And how long was the season? When did it start? When did it finish?
For the writers, it started in June and ended the following May, April or May, depending on
No.
where you were in the rotation. For the showrunner, it started in around Memorial Day and ended the beginning of the end of May the following year. There was about 2 weeks off, which for most people work like that, but they were long
Yeah.
weeks. The showrunner always has something going on. There's always something hanging out there that needs to be dealt with.
Wow. Wow. And then you got an unintended break with the writers' strike, right? But I guess,
Two
yeah,
unintended breaks: the pandemic and then the writer's strike. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sort of coincidentally, Kevin, the woman I had on last week's show was a registered nurse who actually worked during the pandemic, and she worked on some of the sets. I think she
Is that
mentioned,
right?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
her name Diane Curley. So she was, I guess, a compliance officer, on
Yeah,
set.
we called them COVID cops. They were
Right.
difficult. They had a difficult job. We could not stand. They were nice people, but their reason for being there was to make sure that your mask was over your nose. And when we started, we not only had masks, but we had like welders uh, uh, arcing plexiglass.
Wow.
And if you're trying to communicate intimately with an actor, or from writer to actor or actor to actor, that's very difficult. It
Wow.
was very, very difficult process that first
Yeah.
year of shooting
Yeah.
under COVID protocols.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to
Well,
your point, a couple of years later, we had the writers and actors strike that went on
mhm.
way longer than I think anyone intended or expected.
Yeah, but it was during that time, as the saying goes, never waste a good crisis, and you use that time to basically do what you had been thinking about for quite a while, which was to
Yes.
write a novel. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd been I was so I was so used to writing on network TV deadlines that after a couple of months of strike vacation, um, I, I found I was like, there's 4 or 5 hours a day where I was saying like, shouldn't I be doing something? Isn't there something I'm usually doing? And I thought, just try and write a novel. Just
Hmm.
try. Keep it simple. I set it around where you and I live.
Hmm.
Um, I had enough cop lore and NYPD stuff in my head, and I lived in the North Shore of Long Island for 22 years by then, so
Hmm.
I knew all the names and addresses and kind of the dynamics of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun for me to read it in that sense because obviously you changed some of the things around, but there were enough references. I'm like, oh, I've been there.
Yeah, yeah,
It was nice, but it also again, um, it made it authentic for me, and it showed, like, as write what you know, and that's what you know
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and what you didn't know, you talk to police consultants about.
Yeah, and the third thing is whatever neither of them knew, me or them, I just made them up, so yeah, you have that license too,
That's
allegedly.
right. Who's
Yeah,
gonna check?
yeah.
Who's gonna challenge me on that? Yeah, and it's fiction, so sue me.
Yes. It says right on the cover, it says a novel. This is a work
That's
of
right.
fiction. Yes.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So you mentioned before you love detective novels. Were there any ones that particular that you were thinking about? I mean, like I know you read Raymond Chandler, Michael Connolly, guys I
Michael
like a lot.
Connolly is great. Robert B. Parker, who wrote the Spencer series,
Oh yeah.
and
Mhm.
the Jesse Stone series was terrific. The biggest influence sounds so writerly. The guy I admired, the series I admired the most was Travis McGee by John
Mm,
D. McDonald. I believe there were 21 of them. And they they weren't procedurals. They were just wonderful. They were beautifully written plots about a guy who's kind of a bounty hunter salvage expert, lives in a houseboat in Fort Lauderdale. But every few pages in every one of those books, it stops. And the author takes over and explains why it's such a tragedy that Florida is paving over the Everglades, or
mhm.
that these high rises or a lot. He just would go on through the creation of his character. And to me, it was so much more involving because it took the real life of everything that he was writing about. And his hero was thinking about those things as he
Mhm.
was solving the crime or trying to find the killer or trying to evade danger. And
Yeah.
it felt to me like I felt like I knew the character and the way
Mhm.
he thought. And I certainly felt like I knew the way the author wanted to use this platform to sort of go like, if you were sitting next to me at dinner, here's what I'd be talking about, you know?
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
was very inviting, and I always loved them, and I've reread all of them, and, so that was the key to me is to make Jeet Mullane, the hero of this book, somebody who you felt like you sat next to on an airplane or next to at a dinner, like you felt like you
Right.
kinda knew him, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I liked him. I did find myself, I mean, I'm not going to tell people how he got his nickname Jeep. They can read the book and find out. But I did find myself saying, like, wow, there are a lot of Jeeps on Long Island.
Yes.
You
Yep.
know, never saw similars and so forth. But um, so what did you find was different about the process? I mean, I liked, I agree with you. The pacing I thought was important. I've just seen too many action movies and books where it's just like you're just it's just one race after another, and I think people enjoy the pacing and kind of it's not relaxing, but it gives you a sense of well, again, fulsomeness. There's a story here, and it's not just about catching a killer.
Right. The daunting aspects for me were really twofold. One was just the sheer amount of words.
Hmm.
Candidly, I'd never tried to write one single page of prose before. So sitting down and looking at a novel is supposed to be around a minimum of 70,000 words. I think a screenplay and a teleplay is somewhere around 7,000, eight
Wow.
thousand. So it was a lot of words. The second thing was um, it was just me. Everything
Hmm.
else I've done in my since I was 25, whether it's a play or a movie or a television show, you had a whole bunch of people you worked with. It's a very collaborative business. You need a
Hmm.
director, you need actors, you need location managers and wardrobe specialists and hair and makeup and all of it. If you write a book, you're all of those things. So it
Hmm.
took me a little while to go, don't be you've sat with them in production meetings, you've known them, you've worked with them for 40 odd years, imitate them. What is it that they do that you need to do in this? So once I got comfortable with that, it started to come a little easier.
Hmm.
Uh, the third thing is actors. I'd always written everything I'd ever written didn't exist as something I wrote for you to read. It existed as something for a crew and a cast of actors to take and put on film.
Hmm.
So everything I wrote, I didn't have sexy, charismatic, compelling, funny, mysterious actors and actresses. I just had
Hmm.
literally black words on a white page. So
Hmm.
that took some getting used to. That
Yeah.
was that was a lot to learn.
Yeah. 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 People like, oh, you're a writer. It's like, yeah, it's solitary. you know.
Yeah, it is. It was funny going back into, because 14 years of Blue Bloods, I was around 100 people every day,
Hmm.
closely, interacting with at least half the crew, and all of a sudden, you're alone in a room making stuff up. It's very
Right.
different. It's different to get back to that.
Right. So did you have to develop a routine? Did you get up in the morning or did you do it in the afternoon? How did you figure
I've
that
always
out?
had the same routine, which is just sit your ass down, do your pages. Hopefully, they're done by 3 or 4,
Yeah.
and, it's a job. I mean, I've always thought, and anybody who ever asked or when I've talked to kids, like, don't go walking on the beach waiting for inspiration. Don't tell your novel over a bar stool or your screenplay at a dinner party. Sit down and write it and finish it. And so that's been, I learned that a long, long time ago. That's the only way stuff gets done and you get paid.
Right. There you go.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so it is different, but I did find in reading that again, there were certain things that reminded me of your cinematic experience. I guess in one of your reviews talked about your cinematic prose. And I
Yep.
think that that's true to an extent. I mean, the use of flashbacks and ways to fill in and go back and forth. I think also creates a little. You see it on film now too. Like the scene goes through and then stuff goes 5 years earlier. And you can fill in the background. Did you find
Yeah.
yourself thinking about those techniques?
I thought, yes, I don't, I'm not a big fan of flashbacks in movies or TV, at least in the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a rookie novelist and I didn't have enough plot to tell it all in present day linear fashion. But I also felt like if you're going to care about this mystery, you're going to have to care about one or more of the characters. So I felt the license to bring you back to when they formed these friendships or they
Mm-hmm.
first lusted after each other, or any number of scenes that are in Johnny Careless that serve the purpose of investing in those characters and what happens to them. One of
Right.
them's dead, one of them is divorced from the dead one, and one of them was a good buddy of the dead one for most of his adult life. So I thought that readers should know how that all that happened and maybe relate to some of it.
Yeah, yeah. But I thought it was effective because you need to fill in that, and it's hard to do it in straight chronological prose because
Yeah.
also that's not really how the mind works. A lot of times, it's just you're in the present and then you're in the past, and you bring up the past again. So
Uh, I think people do it beautifully. They're just way better writers than I am. So I made my own little trick,
yeah,
and it was really that felt like a good thing. And there's a wonderful, if any of you out there are thinking of writing a novel, there's a wonderful guide from Elmore Leonard, who was a wonderful crime novelist and
mm,
genre novelist for many years, and it's on one page. It's Elmore Leonard's 10 Rules for Writing. And
mm.
the last one is try to leave out the parts that the reader tends to skip over. There's some other gems in there, but that was the one that was the most useful to me.
Hmm.
Was you don't need to know what kind of pattern is on the couch or
Right,
what kind of fork is next to the asparagus, and
right,
that was really helpful in trying to keep it quote unquote cinematic, just like I'll give you the essential information and then I'm going to move the camera, you
right,
know.
right. Yeah. Okay, well, this, folks. Again, I'm sorry we have to take another short break. When we come back, though, we'll be talking much more in our last segment with Kevin Wade, the former executive producer and showrunner of Blue Bloods, and now a novelist with the crime thriller Johnny Careless. So, folks, we'll be back shortly. Don't go anywhere.
Do you like what you're hearing? Well, we've got plenty more where that came from. Head over to 45forward.org, where you'll find a full archive of over 200 episodes of the 45 Forward podcast, all hosted by Ron. Each week, Ron talks with fascinating guests, experts, advocates, and everyday folks, sharing insights and stories to help you live a better, fuller life in your second half. We cover everything from health and caregiving to careers, relationships, and finding purpose, whatever helps you move forward with clarity and confidence. That's 45forward.org. Check it out and keep moving forward. 45 Forward.
Welcome back, folks. This is Ron Roel on Bold Brave TV, 45 Forward of the host. And we're talking with Kevin Wade, formerly with Blue Bloods, and now a novelist with a crime thriller, Johnny Careless. Before we continue, folks, I want to let you know that tell your friends and colleagues if they missed this live show, don't worry. They can find replays on my playlist on Bold Brave TV, its YouTube channel, or just click on my 45 Forward playlist. And you can also find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and most major streaming platforms. So before the break, we were talking about Kevin's novel and about just some of the process of writing it, writing flashbacks, some of the differences, but with his regular cinematic experiences. So I want to talk a little about the themes that the underlying themes, which I really enjoyed too, which was um, uh, really getting into the culture of the North Shore of Long Island, which for
Mhm.
me, I do think, as you pointed, it's sort of a microcosm. It's our area, but
Yeah.
it's a microcosm about, often about class and what you call social tribes and the
Yep.
intersection of them. So talk about that a little bit, how you thought about that theme.
Well, I think it's if you have your eyes and ears open and you live around here or
Mm-hmm.
Palm Beach or certain areas outside of Washington, D.C., or Grosse Pointe, Michigan, or Beverly Hills, California, or a million other places we could name, and just in America, there's usually a shape to society that is haves and have-nots in some way. That
Mm-hmm.
is service class and a ruling class, or whatever it is. Um, when I was a kid in high school, they had us read The Great Gatsby, and
Yeah.
I was one of the few that was assigned that I thought this is good and easy to read, and
Mm-hmm.
I've read it every 2 or 3 years ever since. I've probably read it 20 times or so.
Mm-hmm.
So when I moved here, it is East Egg and West Egg. The
Mm-hmm.
North Shore, the Gold Coast is what Fitzgerald was writing about. It was 100 years ago, I think 2 or 3 days ago, that The Great
Correct.
Gatsby was published, and,
Correct.
when I moved here, it stuck with it. It was very obvious very quickly that a lot of those dynamics were still at play every single day, slightly changed, mostly by music, fashion, and the automobiles.
Mm-hmm.
The roots of them were still around. And so when it came time to think about a book, I thought, I don't want to just have a dead guy and find out how he got dead. And
Mm-hmm.
so just kind of went out and thought, well, it'd be fun to examine this as if I were writing a novel, not just a thriller cop novel.
Yeah. Yeah. I like you. I remember reading The Great Gatsby in 11th grade in high school, part of
Yeah,
American Lit, and read it with your canon of Catcher in the Rye, and and Gatsby was one of them. But
yeah,
it did, I don't know, it just really affected me. And as a matter of fact, between my junior and senior year, I actually went out with I was the editor of my high school paper, and I said I want to write about this. So we actually went out to West Egg looking for Gatsby's mansion.
right.
And of course, it was probably a composite of several places that,
Sure.
but we actually found a place that fit sort of the description, and
Yeah.
we, you know, trepidation walked up to the front door, knocked on it, and said, "We're not. Don't worry, we're not here. We're just looking for Gatsby's house, and this, and they said, yeah, this is one of them that we think."
Uh-huh.
Um,
Well,
so they took us inside and they took us around. I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting, but it did have that kind of pull. And I
yeah,
think it was, part of it is like you're finding, wow, this is something that I read about and it's actually here. So there was that pull to it, but also there was about I don't know if it's when you talk about the different class differences, but also the psychological differences of longing and yearning for the past and trying to
mhm,
deal with that and trying to salvage it or trying to make sense of it.
yeah.
And I think that's so it has a certain but it's not just nostalgia. It's a different kind of longing,
Yeah, I mean, Fitzgerald got all those dynamic. He got sex and money and the city versus the country. He got sort of everything, and he did it in like 175 pages. It's a very slim novel today, and
Right.
they would probably say that's a novella, F. Scott. You
Right.
know, but it's an astonishing achievement that is fresh 100 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I did, I did find myself thinking about it, and yeah, and then I saw like you, like, wow, well, this is the 100th anniversary of Gatsby being published, and as often happens, like people didn't think much of it when it came out, and
Right?
here we are, 100 years later.
Yeah, it's the one. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
My
Um,
friend Doug, I'll tell you one quick funny story. My friend
sure.
Doug produced the latest movie of The Great Gatsby. which was with Leo DiCaprio, and they shot it all in Australia because they got some money to do it. But there were some young American, college age production assistants on it, and one of them came up to Doug one day and said, "What made you want to do a movie of The Great Gatsby?" And Doug said, "Well, Fitzgerald and I were roommates in college." And the guy said, "Wow, that must be so cool that you're doing his book." And it was that thing of like, it was as someone who was, say, 21, thinks all old guys are the same age. They're just really old. And so he had no idea. To him, Fitzgerald could have gone to college in the 60s or 70s instead of the 1915 or whatever it was. He was at Princeton.
Right. Yeah. So, any surprises that that came out of the experience, either with Blue Bloods or with your break into novels?
No surprise. Novel. I mean, putting a book out is by far the most retail experience I've ever
Hmm.
been involved in. Even when I was 25, I wrote my first play. It debuted in a 99 seat off Broadway theater. All of that was taken care of, partly because there's actors in it, and perhaps the theater has a building or a company that's known. A novel is a complete startup if you're a new book writer, if you're an unknown novelist with his first book. So the retail aspect of it. I mean, I think if I were to call up Macmillan Publishing tomorrow and say, "Send me 200 copies. I'm going to load up the trunk of the car and go door to door," they would go, "That's a great idea." It's like, that's fantastic, because it really is very, very retail.
Yeah.
So I certainly understand now at the later end of the game why so many of our great writers, especially even tending towards literary, but even some thriller writers, have jobs as college professors or teach classes or take on editing assignments, because it's very hard to make. There's an old saying about the theater that certainly goes for this: you can't make a living, but you can make a killing. But
Mm.
the make a living part, I think, is probably very hard in novel writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think we had a previous conversation about this in terms of advice for people going into the field, and I think you said, "Don't do it." You hit it with me.
There's always that, but
Yeah.
I think no, I would never discourage anyone from doing that. The important thing to remember, and hopefully it's the thing that lifts you up and frees you up. Every story has been told. We just talked about The Great Gatsby vis-a-vis what I was thinking of when I
Mhm.
wrote Johnny
Right.
Careless. Not that they are comparable in any way, but every story's been told. Every story you
Mhm.
could possibly think of has been done dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of times. The only thing that makes it different and why you should do it is because it would be in your voice. No
Mhm.
one's ever written that story in that voice.
Right.
And that's it. When I talk to film schools and college kids and all sorts of stuff over all the years, that's the key to it. Um,
Mhm.
the story won't be new. It'll feel new to you, but I'll
Mhm.
be able to give you 10 examples off the top of my head why it's like The Wizard of Oz or The Dirty Dozen or On the Waterfront.
Right.
The important thing is that you're the writer this time, so it will be new. And I think
Mhm.
anybody who sits down to write a story has to remember that every day and every page.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I think there are just a certain number of stories, but they're interesting updating of them, and
Yeah.
and relevance to it. So I did, when you talking about, Johnny Careless, I mean, just the element of, I was interested. So you picked that name, Careless, that his nickname, but I
Yeah.
think that tells something about the time we're living in and
Yeah.
about how that connects with the class differences in Fitzgerald's time, but that persists today. I mean, I think
Yeah.
there is, it's an interesting ambiguous word. And so, did you think a lot about that? About that your choice of it?
I just tried to come up with a cool title. I did. I really did. And
Mm.
then I kind of reverse engineered it.
Uh-huh,
But
okay.
certainly, I mean, when Fitzgerald wrote about Tom and Daisy, but especially Tom Buchanan, he wrote about how he just left a mess in his wake and
Right,
didn't care, and someone would pick up after him. And
right,
I've watched people around here, as I'm sure you have, or friends of our kids or whatever, and that's how they get to go through life, especially in their younger years. It'll be taken care of.
right. Yeah, and even in later years, you some people like that, they're careless in many dimensions of the word,
Yep.
and that's something we need to deal with as society, what to deal with that kind of carelessness. So we're caring versus careless, So I
So
think
you
that's
sit down, you write a police novel about it,
there you go. There
karma.
Yeah, yeah. So this is another chapter. So now you're gonna keep going, right?
I'm going to keep going. Last summer after Blue Bloods was over, I took another 2 months where I went, it's nice to be free. And then about 60 days in, went, aren't I supposed to be doing something
Mhm.
for 4 or 5 hours a day? So I started a second, not a sequel, but the same main character, Jeet Mullane, a local police chief in his late 30s, and it's called Pirate Jenny. I sent the
Okay.
first 6 or 7 chapters on to Macmillan to see if they had any interest. They bought it off the first 6 or 7 chapters, so I'll finish it in a month or two. I've been
Wow.
writing it since then, so
Yeah,
it's taken
yeah.
a lot longer than writing the first one. The first one,
Right.
I had no idea what I was doing. The second one, I have just the slightest idea what I'm doing, so then you have all the self-doubt that you're not doing it right.
Where would we be without self-doubt, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Keeps you
It
on
keeps us going. Yeah. And what about no interest in taking another dive at
No,
movies
I
or
mean,
TVs and
even if I did, I'll be honest with you. I mean, not to leave this room, but I turned 71 last month. And Hollywood is a notoriously ageist business for very good reason because it's absolutely true. So
mm,
the idea of going with my hat in hand to movie studios or television studios and saying I've got something that the young people are just going to eat up is
mm,
a fool's errand. And so I had a very nice run and a place at the table for a long time between movies and television. I'm just not going to monkey with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, hopefully though, you see little pieces of um, older folks, in TV and theater. I think that people are catching up a little bit to the reality of demographics, right?
Mostly actors. No, I'm talking about. I mean, and there are some wonderful directors who still work who are older than I am
Mhm.
considerably. But listen, famously, the roles dwindle out for actresses once they hit 35. The old
Mm.
joke is you're the ingenue, and then you're the mother of the ingenue, and then you're the judge in the divorce court in the movie. Uh, for writers, once in television certainly, but in film, everybody who runs the business is in their 20s and 30s. So you're coming. There's just a barrier to entry. There's a barrier to entry when you're young because you're trying
Mhm.
to get into a door that everybody wants to get in. There's a barrier to entry when you're older because the people running the shops, you're their parents' age.
Right.
It's just the way it goes. It always has been. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a long way of me saying I'm very grateful to have a second novel to write.
Good. Good. And we're grateful that you are doing it. So I appreciate that. Yeah. Um, so let's see. Anything that I haven't asked you that you want to mention in terms of final thoughts about
No,
that?
not really. It's been wonderful to talk to you. I don't, I've been extremely lucky, but if there's any lesson in the way I was a playwright in my 20s. I wrote movies in my 30s and 40s. The movie phone stopped ringing when I was about 50. I
Mhm.
started trying to write television and then was blessed with a long, long run at Blue Bloods. The only through line is trying to write stuff in my voice, trying to write stuff that I thought people would like to see. and to sit your butt down in front of some sort of keyboard or writing pad and do it almost every day, and most of all, finish stuff.
Right.
So it's not very mysterious. It's mysterious as to uh, who likes what and how something becomes popular, which is out of your sphere, you know.
Yeah.
So it's
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you've done it. I think it's been a really nice uh, series of chapters, and that's sort of the way I do my show. I think
yep,
about it that way, and I think that people, one of my mottos is, plan but don't predict. You don't know what's going to happen, but to keep at it. And I think it's, that's my sense of, for people who want to be writers is then, you know what? There's one rule: write, and
right,
keep writing and finish. I think that's
and
important
finish
too.
it.
And
Yes,
yeah, and you can go back and revise it. A
yep,
lot of what I realized that how much of my work was actually to say, well, just get it down and then
yeah.
go back to it. And it's in the revision process, the gestation process, that things get, worked out and you see things you didn't see before. But at any rate, so listen, Kevin, this has been fun. I really appreciate your being on the show. Thanks for a terrific conversation. I hope you gave some thoughts for people who are thinking about this, and basically, I want them to know. So basically, they can find your books at bookstores
Am
and
I allowed to
Amazon.
hold it up? Are we allowed to do this?
You absolutely, there it is.
Okay, there it is, Johnny Careless from Macmillan, available in hardcover,
Mm-hmm,
Kindle, and a very well done audiobook,
mm-hmm.
available wherever first novels are sold.
Terrific, terrific. Okay, and if people want to get in touch with you, they do it through Macmillan or through.
Through
Uh,
Macmillan, or I believe it's at Kevin Wade on Instagram.
Okay, very good. At Kevin Wade and Instagram. Great. Okay. So, folks, thanks again for spending this hour with me and uh, helping me learn and grow and appreciate stories about how we can make our second half of life even better than the first. Be sure to join me next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, when I'll be talking with Brian Zimmerman, who's the owner of a gardening design consulting business, who will talk about his mindful approach to sustainable gardening and health and stimulation and social benefits, particularly as we get older. So, folks, until then, keep moving forward, 45 forward.
This has been 45 Forward with host Ron Roel. Tune in each week as Ron tackles the many aspects of health, finance, family and friends, housing, work, and personal pursuits, all as part of an integrated plan and to take charge of your unretiring life during these uncertain times. Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.